Chapter 4, Discoveries. Soon Helen could spell enough words to ask questions. She wanted to know what her mother and father and sister and teacher looked like. She learned that Annie had black hair and pretty blue eyes. Annie had a merry Irish wit, and she taught Helen to love laughter. Helen's days were happy that summer. Every morning she and Annie had lessons. Annie made maps out of clay. Helen could feel the shapes of mountains and rivers and continents. Annie gave Helen an orange to hold when she explained that the world was round. When the lesson was over, Helen held up the orange and laughed. "Now we can cut the world," she spelled. Helen learned to count with wooden beads and straws. She touched trees and flowers and learned their names. She held an egg in her hand and felt a baby chick peck its way out. She put her hands in a bowl of water and felt tadpoles swim between her fingers. One morning there was a prize for Helen. Annie gave her several square cards. On each card, Helen could fill some raised dots. She was puzzled. Her fingers touched the dots carefully. Then Annie spelled the letter A with her fingers and put Helen's finger on a card. The raised dots on the card meant A also. Helen soon began to understand the dots were another way of spelling words. This way of reading is called Braille. It had been invented by a blind man named Louis Braille. The letters were printed in raised dots so blind people could read with their fingers. For days, Helen practiced reading the Braille letters. When she knew them all, she put 3 cards together and spelled D-O-G. She ran to find Belle and made the dog's paws touch the letters. One morning, Helen spelled a whole sentence to surprise Annie. "Doll is on bed," Annie promised. "Tomorrow you shall have your first book in Braille and start reading." Helen had other important things to learn. She learned to dress herself neatly and make her own bed. She picked up her toys. She learned to be gentle with her little sister. She did not hit Belle or squeeze the kittens. Sometimes Helen's old tempers came back, but when she touched Teacher's face and felt her mouth turn down, Helen knew she had been naughty. Helen's worst punishment was when Annie would not spell stories to her. Annie had taught Helen to love books as much as she did. When Christmas came, Helen helped make spicy cookies. It was the first Christmas she had understood. She smelled the tree and helped trim its pine branches. Annie helped her wrap presents to surprise the family. On Christmas night, Captain and Mrs. Keller looked at Helen. She sat under the tree holding her new doll. Her face was full of love and joy and understanding. Mrs. Keller took Annie's hand. "Miss Annie," she said, "I thank God every day of my life for sending you to us." And here is Helen baking cookies.